CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Paul Barber. Our top stories this hour. The UN warns of water shortages, disease and dispersed landmines in Libya as the residents of Derna grapple with whether to stay or to go. Counting the cost in Morocco, residents in quake-affected villages sift through ruins where their homes once stood as crews begin to restore power. And the campaigner swimming all the way to the United Nations in New York with a message about cleaning up our rivers. People in the flooded Libyan city of Derna are facing a dilemma over whether to stay or to leave after the United Nations warned of water shortages and displaced landmines. The UN says munitions which have been dispersed by floodwaters pose a risk to the thousands of people on the move. Libyan state media says at least 891 buildings have been destroyed in Derna after it was hit by a deluge of water from 2 collapsed dams nearly a week ago. The UN says it believes at least 11,300 people have died, while more than 10,000 others are still missing. Divisions and political rivalry between the governments in western and eastern Libya have persisted for years, but the devastating floods may have, temporarily at least, brought them closer together. Many humanitarian aid teams from the capital, Tripoli, have been mobilising to assist people in Derna. Our correspondent, Adel El Marouhi, reports.
Members of the Tripoli Red Crescent office are busy packing and labelling medications. The shelves are getting emptier as the number of packages increases. Everything here is going to Derna city in eastern Libya, where thousands have died and many more are still missing following deadly floods.
This is our 5th convoy so far. Our stocks of blankets, food and almost everything else are running out. We need urgent donations. Derna is facing a major shortage of fresh water. We have plenty here. Every day, shipments of bottled water leave here by trucks heading to Derna.
Besides its office in Tripoli, the Libyan Red Crescent has 30 other offices. All of them are doing the same, prioritizing urgent needs of Derna city. The youth too are heavily engaged in aid initiatives. The Libyan Boy Scouts in the western capital are stacking water bottles, mattresses and blankets. They then load them on trucks heading to emergency teams assisting people in the east.
For the first time, we're seeing all Libyan institutions, municipalities working together for one cause. Even the armed forces are joining hands. All Libyans have set aside their political differences. Libya is one, focusing on one humanitarian crisis. There is no place for politics to stand in the way. I think this is a chance to overcome all our differences and revive national unity in Libya. We know that when one city is in pain, the rest of Libya will also feel the pain.
The Tripoli-based government's Ministry of Health is collecting blood donations to assist victims of this devastating natural disaster. After the blood gets tested and cleared for donation, health officials here will make a rare direct communication with officials from their parallel and rival government in the east. All of Libya now has one mission. Everyone wants to assist Derna and other neighboring cities that have been hit hard by this week's floods. Adel Mahroui, CGTN.
Iman Trabelsi is Near and Middle East spokesperson for the International Committee of the Red Cross. She told me more about the situation in Derna.
Since the first day that followed the catastrophe, we've been working closely with the Libyan Red Crescent and the local authorities in order to sustain most urgent needs. And to be honest, the easiest way or the simplest way to describe those needs is that they are massive and that they are growing by the minute. We work in Libya in close collaboration and partnership with the Libyan Red Crescent, and this goes beyond this catastrophe. Our presence and operation are run with close collaboration with the Libyan Red Crescent. As we're speaking, assessing the needs among society, the affected population, they start from the very little things: food, blankets, proper shelter, access to water, electricity, telecommunication, etc. The local authorities as well, they do require further support and on the matter of the crisis management, including the management of the dead. We've been providing assistance in terms of food, medicines, basic equipment for the affected families, and we are planning to send more aid into the affected region in the upcoming period. More further assistance has been deployed and channeled from our warehouses, either in Benghazi or from Geneva, in order to provide more assistance. But to be honest, the main challenge that most of the aid operators, aid organizations are facing right now is the fact that the vital infrastructure, namely roads and bridges, was terribly affected by the flooding, which makes the process of channeling fast further assistance quite complicated for all actors involved in this process.
So a massive and growing need, an incredibly difficult situation on the ground with the infrastructure so damaged. Is there a clearer picture building up of the extent of the emergency and how many people need urgent help?
It's very hard to determine exact numbers as we're speaking. The first response and the urgent response is still ongoing, and therefore numbers of the dead, the injured is still growing. It's very hard to determine. We're speaking about thousands of deaths so far. The number of affected, directly affected or indirectly affected families and population is also very hard to determine at this stage. There are some figures from the UN saying that at least, as we're speaking, there is at least 10,000 people are deemed missing, but these numbers are very primary. It's a very early stage to determine, taking the state of emergency and the state of high uncertainty that the population are facing right now. The operation of retrieving bodies is still happening. There is an additional risk of the spread of unexploded devices due to the fact that Derna was considered as one of the areas suffering from a high contamination in terms of unexploded devices, and that is due to the conflict, but also to previous conflicts as well. So what happened today is that the flooding have moved some of these devices probably to areas that were considered as uncontaminated in previous times, and therefore this will cause a risk and a challenge for the ongoing rescue operations, but it will also consider a high risk and a high challenge on the longer run, as it might jeopardize the rehabilitation and people's ability to go back to their lives, to their homes, and to rebuild their lives.
Recovery teams in Morocco are working to restore power in some of the areas worst affected by a powerful earthquake earlier this month. Damage near the epicenter in the high Atlas Mountains is widespread, and the search for bodies continues as the death toll nears 3,000. Many survivors have lost everything and are in desperate need of clean water, food and shelter. And our correspondent Ken Brown is in Marrakesh for us now. Ken, tell us about what's happening there now.
Yes, we're here in Marrakesh, where life is largely returning to normal. Tourists continue to flood into this city. This area was damaged, as you can see, the mosque behind me that lost its minaret. We had some good news today for Marrakesh also, as the World Bank and the IMF decided that they're going to press on with the annual meeting here in the city. That means an influx of 10,000 people. I know it's also an opportunity for the Moroccan officials to speak with the IMF, the World Bank, about the rebuild. We're talking about a cost of damage that's between $10 and $15 billion, according to one local Moroccan economist. But while in Marrakesh we're seeing things return to normal, 60 kilometers from here there are still scenes of absolute devastation. Many villages have been just wiped off the map completely. We're seeing The numbers are nearly 3,000 people have died, 5,500 injured. As many as 300,000 have been affected by this, according to the Red Cross. 8 days after the earthquake struck, some villages still haven't been reached by the authorities, and we're hearing of donkeys bringing essential supplies up to some of those remote areas. Now, we visited some of the worst hit villages this week. Here's the latest. Grief and loss in the Atlas Mountains. Entire villages destroyed. Talat Yaqub was at the epicenter of the quake, and an urgent clearance operation continues. It's perilous work with rock falls and ongoing aftershocks. Hakim Frindi from the Infrastructure Ministry says the priority is keeping the roads clear, but he's also looking to the future.
I think in the long term, from an engineering perspective, it is time to design more resilient roads, taking into account the seismic activity and the dangers posed by earthquakes.
Just over a week since this catastrophic earthquake struck Morocco, and thoughts have now turned from rescue to recovery and relief. Here at the epicenter of the tragedy, it's clear just how much work needs to be done. On the ground, charitable organisations like the Fuel Relief Fund have been aiding the humanitarian response. They visit camps for the displaced, donating canisters of gas.
I've been to 17 major natural disasters in the world. This is one of the worst I've ever seen. And the resilience of these people is amazing. Everybody is so receptive.
Mark Daniels is a volunteer from the Netherlands.
The people, they're using the fuel to cook, to boil water, and to heat themselves. And in the mountains over here, the epicenter, it's getting cold. It's getting colder every day. So people, they need the fuel. They need the propane.
With entire villages erased by the earthquake, people are readjusting to life in small camps like this one. Brahim Aoud comes from Imaunen, a tiny hamlet where all 32 houses were destroyed. He sleeps within walking distance of where his home was reduced to rubble.
We hope the government can help us rebuild our houses so that everyone can return home and life can continue. We want to stay here. This is where we come from.
Hundreds of small camps like this one have been set up in villages in the mountains. People say they don't know how long they'll have to live like this. Most just want a home to return to.
So, Ken, it's just over a week since the disaster, but thousands of displaced people really face an uncertain future, don't they, living in camps?
Yes, we've been hearing Moroccan NGOs putting the affected numbers up at around 380,000 people, many of those sleeping in these new tent villages that we've seen. They're not huge displacement camps. People prefer to stay in their local communities, stay close to home. Yesterday, the WHO said that the Al Haous region, the worst hit region, the health situation there is under control. We have not seen outbreaks of illnesses or diseases. Most people now have some shelter and food. Many people say they don't want to leave their village. They don't want to go to any big shelters. And as I mentioned earlier, many are goat herders, sheep farmers. They don't want to leave their flocks. Now, the government on Thursday met with King Mohammed VI. They talked about rebuilding 50,000 homes. But we've seen the scale of the damage and destruction here. That's going to take years. For now, in El Haous, the priority is still getting people somewhere to sleep and enough to eat, Paul.
Ken Brown in Marrakesh, thank you. In other news, Chinese Premier Li Qiang has called for closer cooperation between China and Southeast Asian countries at the opening ceremony of this year's China-ASEAN Expo in the Chinese city of Nanning. Our correspondent there, Gao Ang, has the details.
Work together for a harmonious home and a shared future, and promoting high-quality development of the Belt and Road Initiative and nurturing a new epicenter of growth. This is the theme of the 20th China-ASEAN Expo this year. At the opening ceremony on Sunday, Chinese Premier Li Qiang was joined by foreign leaders and senior officials from Cambodia, Laos, Malaysia, and several other countries. Boosting trade and economic cooperation between China and ASEAN countries and promoting regional economic integration were high on the agenda. Officials also discussed the ways to promote exchanges and cooperation between enterprises from both sides.
China will adhere to the basic national policy of opening up, deepen the opening up of rules, regulations, management, standards, and other institutional systems, and increase the protection of intellectual property rights. We will make every effort to maintain and promote fair competition, and strive to create a good business environment that allows investors from all over the world to feel at ease, assured, and comfortable.
Official data shows that nearly 2,000 enterprises are attending the expo, up more than 18% from last year's edition. Plenty of forums are set to take place during the 4-day event to discuss China-ASEAN cooperation in diverse areas, including e-commerce, environmental protection, energy cooperation, the blue economy, and more. China has remained ASEAN's largest trading partner for 14 consecutive years, and the two sides have been each other's top trading partners for 3 years in a row. According to officials, advanced technology, sustainable development, and trade and investment facilitation are high on the agenda for this year's expo. Organizers have also set up special areas for digital technologies and industrial design, aiming to boost cooperation on all fronts between China and ASEAN countries. Gang, CGTN, Nanning, Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. 30 days, 500 kilometres, and one important message. The British activist who swam the length of the Hudson River to tell the UN why we need to keep our rivers and oceans clean.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans, grey rhinos, and unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
There's a new agenda for a new world, accelerating change in almost every part of our lives. It's shifting the norms of how we work, travel, and connect. How we think, interact, and develop. It's a new reality, a new agenda with me, Juliet Mann.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Welcome back. A reminder of our main stories. The UN warns of water shortages, disease and dispersed landmines in Libya as the residents of Derna grapple with whether to stay or to go. And counting the cost in Morocco. Residents in quake-affected villages sift through ruins where their homes once stood as crews begin to restore power. Russia says it has thwarted a coordinated attack on Crimea, shooting down at least 6 drones. The Kremlin also says drone strikes were launched on several regions inside Russia, including Moscow. Our correspondent there, Dasha Chernyshova, has the latest.
In a fresh wave of drone attacks, Moscow accused Ukraine of attempting to hit capital Moscow. 2 drones were intercepted in the early hours of Sunday on their approach to Moscow, disrupting air traffic in the capital. Another drone was destroyed in Kaluga region, and in Tula region, a drone fell on the territory of the logistics center number 1. According to the Ministry of Regional Security, no casualties or significant damage to the infrastructure was reported. In southwestern city of Oryol, the governor said Kyiv drone fell down on an oil depot, causing fire. And in the Voronezh region, Moscow says Kyiv attempted a terrorist attack by aircraft-type unmanned aerial vehicle that was thwarted by the radio-electronic combat forces. And in Crimea, often attacked by the Ukrainian drones, 6 unmanned aerial vehicles were intercepted by the Russian air defenses of the western, northwestern and eastern coasts. Moscow says Ukraine's drone attacks against the Russian Federation are acts of desperation against what Moscow describes as a failed Ukrainian counteroffensive. In the meantime, Sergei Lavrov, Russian foreign minister, said the US is pursuing the war against Russia by supplying more weapons to Ukraine. He said Ukraine has long been prepared for many years to fight with Russia to inflict a strategic defeat on Moscow. Dasha Cherneshova, CGTN, Moscow.
The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has vowed to step up support to manage migration after visiting an overcrowded facility on the Italian island of Lampedusa. Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni says the country is facing unsustainable pressure. More than 8,000 people have arrived on the island over the past 3 days alone, sparking protests by local residents.
Migration is a European challenge and it needs a European answer and solution. It is concrete actions that will bring change on the ground. It is only through solidarity and unity that we can achieve this. And you can count on the European Union.
Thousands of Australians have taken part in rallies across the country to support recognising Indigenous people in the Constitution. In a referendum next month, voters will be asked whether the government should set up an advisory body to give Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people their own say on federal policies. However, recent polls suggest that the voiced parliament proposal could be heading for defeat. Ancient tea plantations in southwest China have been added to the UNESCO World Heritage List. Delegates meeting in Riyadh said the Jingmai mountain site was of outstanding universal value. UNESCO says the old tea forests have been culturally important since the 10th century. Climate activists have spray-painted one of Berlin's most important landmarks, the Brandenburg Gate, demanding an end to the use of fossil fuels by 2030. German police said the members of the so-called Last Generation group used fire extinguishers to spray orange paint onto the columns of the historic tourist attraction. Scientists say the amount of sea ice surrounding Antarctica has entered a new low state, far below any previously recorded winter level. Satellite data shows around 1.5 million square kilometres less ice than usual for the time of year. Antarctic ice helps to cool the Earth's temperature by reflecting heat from the sun. Scientists say the declining ice will create the opposite effect and heat the atmosphere. Now, he has swum long distances in all the world's oceans, but now the British climate campaigner, Lewis Pugh, has become the first person to swim the entire length of the Hudson River in the United States. His aim is to raise awareness of keeping our rivers healthy, and he timed his latest swim to finish in New York at the start of the UN General Assembly, where, as he tells CGTN, he will address delegates about protecting our waters.
I've just got out the river, 315 miles. I'm absolutely exhausted, but also rejuvenated. All the rivers in the world, the Hudson is the one river where I can tell a story about all rivers. And the reason for that is because at the source, you've got a beautiful wilderness area with bears and beavers and vultures and bald eagles. And at the end, New York City. And at the end, there is the headquarters of the United Nations. And so on Monday morning, I'm into the United Nations to deliver a message about how important it is that we protect our rivers. The rivers of the world are the arteries of our planet. We cannot have a healthy planet without healthy rivers. And everything which we pour into the rivers, be it industrial waste, agricultural runoff, plastic pollution, all of that not only kills the river and all the wildlife that lives in the river, but also it then goes down into the ocean and does exactly the same thing.
Hungary is a nation long associated with classical music and many famous piano composers. The instrument's basic design hasn't changed for centuries, but now one Hungarian company thinks it's time for an upgrade, integrating cutting-edge components and creating a fresh new look. Our correspondent Pablo Gutierrez has more.
A deep connection is forged when a pianist takes their seat at the keyboard, whether their fingers glide gently across the keys in legato or strike them with force in forte. The instrument obediently follows the musician's command and the music unfurls. However, for celebrated pianist Gergely Bogani, a dissonance existed between the music he envisioned in his mind and what emanated from the grand pianos he performed on.
I always felt the desire to improve on the sound. And maybe I'm not the only one in the pianist world.
Bogani embarked on a 2-decade-long journey to perfect the grand piano sound. He scrutinized over 1,600 components, seeking ways to enhance their performance. Bogani pianos feature a soundboard constructed from carbon fiber, unlike conventional wooden soundboards found in traditional grand pianos. The company says that can deliver crystal clear sound when musicians strike the keys. Bogani refers to the carbon fiber soundboard as the heart and soul of his pianos, since it extends the resonance of the notes played.
That's a very tricky use of the carbon fiber composite, because carbon fiber alone wouldn't work. So, well, just to say an example, look, this kind of still goes on and on and on.
However, it's the external makeover of the piano that captivates the eye. Resting on just 2 legs, it creates a visual illusion that seems to challenge the laws of gravity.
I was talking to my designer friend back 20 years ago, and I had to make him understand something which I don't even understand. It's incredible. And then he somehow understood the message.
A limited production of just 22 pianos has been completed. One of his pianos was presented to the government of Finland on the anniversary of its independence. The rest are in concert halls around the globe.
It's a great honor to be a servant of Hungary, of Hungarian culture and music in general.
His company is creating 2 new compact prototypes, yet he assures us that the unique sound of his instruments will remain unchanged, guaranteeing that when a pianist plays the keys and the hammers strike the strings, it will unmistakably carry the Bogani signature. Pablo Gutierrez, CGTN, Budapest.
And the headlines again. The UN warns of water shortages, disease and dispersed landmines in Libya as the residents of Derna grapple with whether to stay or to go. And counting the cost in Morocco. Residents in quake-affected villages sift through ruins where their homes once stood as crews begin to restore power. And that is The World Today. Thank you for watching. There's more news at the top of this hour. Coming up next, it's Razor. For now, from all the team in London, bye-bye.